All right, so that's for your resume. The second part of your documentation when you submit your application materials is having a good reference page. The reference page is going to, do not include your references on your resume. Don't say references available upon request, but do put your references on an additional sheet and include them in the application for a specific job. Make sure that you ask your references to be able to include them. Again, if you've got faculty members out there, shake their hand and say, "Hi, my name is Chris. I was in one of your classes. I really gained a lot of information and experience from you. Would you be willing to be a good reference or give a good reference for me?" If they kind of shirk back a little bit or pause or kind of ponder that, you need to give the faculty member a way out, or staff member for that matter. You need to say, I know that you're extremely busy right now. I've got some other references that I could ask if you would like for me to, and let them say no to you in that way. The reality is that you don't want to put them in there and then have them give you a poor reference or a bad reference. So make sure that you ask them ahead of time. Also, let them know what you're applying for. It's really embarrassing. I'll speak from experience on that side for sure. When I get a call from an employer saying, "Hey, so-and-so is a CDA for you for a couple of years on their resume, could you tell me a little bit about them?" And I've got to go back and think about, and often their question is, how long have you known the applicant? When did you work with the applicant? And so for me, it's like I've got 8 years worth of CDAs that I'm thinking back through, trying to remember which one it was and what years they served as a CDA for me. And so again, please tell your faculty members what kinds of jobs you're looking for so they can start thinking ahead about good responses. Also, when you're done with the process, after you've gotten a job and been offered an opportunity, accepted it, go back and thank your references. Your hope is to be able to use these folks on an ongoing basis, and so please go back and thank them for their time, thank them for their impact on your life while you have been here at JBU, and most of all, thank them for the opportunity to get a job. Because they were definitely part of that process, whether you acknowledge that or not. It also helps them to feel good about giving you another good positive reference the next time you're out there looking. So again, I would encourage you to be in good communication with them. For your reference page, so it needs to be a second page to your resume. Your reference page needs to have your contact information up at the top, so the same header that your resume had. Again, if you're a design major or graphic design, media, digital media, if you are a marketing major maybe, again, if you've got some creative elements within your resume, it needs to be also transferred to your reference page as well to make them look cohesive together. But for your references, you need the title and position that they hold. If that's different than how you knew them, so if they were your manager at Burger King growing up and now they're the manager of McDonald's, you need to list manager at McDonald's and then in parentheses say manager at Burger King so that the employer knows that that was the work experience that they're connected with. Also, you need to always have a physical address for them, email address, and their phone number. Employers are verifying work and doing these reference checks on a multitude of different areas and platforms, so they need to have access to all of that information for each one of your references. I often get the question, how many references do I need to have? My encouragement for you is to have 3 or 4 really good references. Employers or faculty members are fantastic. Other staff members maybe that you've interacted with, a coach would be a great reference to have. Again, what I would encourage you to try to steer away from are personal references. So if you've got a best friend or a parent, and even if your parent was your boss at an internship experience or work experience, I would not use them as a reference because they're biased and the employer typically won't even call them. So make sure that they're really good references as you put them down. The second piece of that too is you either need a reference page or in the application process, often what they'll do is they'll say, we want to know all your previous work experience and references that you've worked with in the application process. If you do it in the application process, you don't need to have that reference page as you submit your reference materials. So here's kind of a quick reference sheet for I need a job. You can see there's a good information up at the top, and then employers. They did put a personal one in there. Again, I would encourage you not to. But again, they've got 3 or 4 really good ones, and then they added the personal one. You see the title that they're at, the companies that they're currently working for, and all their contact information is included in that. Paper and layout for a resume. Don't get too fancy with a resume. If it is distracting from the reader, if they can't tell where things are flowing and how they're being communicated, again, this is your marketing tool about yourself. You can't tell them about all of your life, but you do need to give them a quick snapshot of how you're directly related to the job and qualified for the job you're applying for. That needs to be evident. You need to tell a really good story and compelling story around that. Don't get too fancy. Don't use graphics. Again, some of you are digital media. Your resumes can be a little bit more on the creative side. Marketing your resumes too, if you're looking at going into advertising or sales or marketing on that side, it can be a little bit more jazzed up in terms of some of the elements that you bring in, but it can't be distracting from the actual content. It needs to add to the content of your resume. Also, emphasize the top third of your resume. So if you take your hand and put it on the very top of your resume and about a third of the way down on the page, that's as much material as the employer can get through in about 10 to 15 seconds, which is right now about the average of what they're spending at initially making a yes, no, or maybe decision about your resume. So again, when it comes to your objective, when it comes to your skills, maybe it's your work experience, whatever is the most important for them to see, make sure it gets up in that top third of your resume. Especially if you're a family and human and you have the ability, because you're applying for Department of Human Services, to write a 2-page resume, make sure that your stuff, again, the most relevant stuff, gets up at the very top, because the employer is not going to read all the way through it to get to that level. So again, there are some tricks that you can do. One of those tricks, for instance, is if you've got a lot of work experience where most recent jobs are really not related, but they're good jobs that you've had, or good, maybe you've done work study this year and you're like, yeah, work study is not really relevant, but my internship last year was. Put your internship up in your education section and then move that up to the top of your resume. For some of you, you've had several work experiences that weren't internships. One way to separate that out then would be to say related work experiences and then other work experiences. And for the related, you'd bullet point those out. You'd give them a full picture of what you did in those related ones. And then in the other work experiences, you typically would list the title of what you did, the company who you worked for, and then the dates. And they would all be in one line right underneath each other. What that does for the employer is to let them know, and again, you highlight what's really relevant to the job. For the rest of those things that you've done that aren't maybe as related, it at least lets them see your work history and your experience. That lets them see if there are gaps. It lets them know what you've been doing. For many of those work experiences, you've done them here at JBU, and so it also lets them see that you worked and attended classes at the same time, which again communicates something to them. Finally, use resume paper. Sorry, that was the very first point, but we'll come at it as number 4. Resume paper is a heavy cotton weight paper. You can get it at the bookstore, you can get it at Walmart. If you are going to submit a resume in physical format, so you're going to take it and hand it to an employer or drop it off for an employer, it must be on resume paper. It sets you apart from everyone else who didn't take the time or care about it. Again, you spent time putting this resume together for the employer. You need to use resume paper to continue that process and that cycle that you've taken time and you're really intentional about working for them. The second piece is if you submit online, I've got a couple of rules. One of them is if you submit your resume online and you're going to send it out to a company or to an employer or a friend to pass around the company or to a company that you know doesn't use, maybe it's not a large company, I would encourage you to save it as a PDF file. That way, as it's getting passed around, the formatting stays consistent. If they open it up in a Mac and you did it on a PC or vice versa, all your bullet points don't become question marks. Again, it communicates well that way. Also, there have been some horror stories of some students who have actually put their resume out there in Word format and had it passed around, and someone changed it as it was going through the process so that their other friend could get the job instead of them. And they found out about it later on. So again, it keeps honest people honest by doing it in PDF form. It also makes sure that you're clearly communicating and communicating consistently across all those areas. The second part is if you know you're applying for a big company, a company like Tyson, a company like Walmart, J.B. Hunt even, many of those companies are using resume software. So you submit it into a database. If it ever asks you to please submit it as a Word file, please do that, or a .x or notes file, because that means that their computer is reading your resume and sorting out whether you meet the qualifications. Again, Walmart gets hundreds of thousands of resumes each day, and they don't have time to manually go through all of them, and so your resume gets scanned, there are some PDF files that don't work with the scanning equipment, and so you want to make sure that you don't limit yourself that way. So again, if you're submitting it there, the scanner can read everything. Also within that, if you do a Word document, make sure that you don't put your name and contact information in the header. So when you open up a Word document, you double click up in the margin, there's this header thing that will pop up, and the rest of the resume kind of goes gray. Don't put anything in the header because that resume software can't read things in the header or the footer. So what I would encourage you to do is take the margins and move them out. Also within that, please don't use resume, the templates that are out there. Even the templates in Word are really crummy. You can get it to look good once, but if you ever want to go back and change anything, it's very, very difficult to do it well than to make it look very good when you're done. So please just start with a blank Word document. I know that may sound intimidating, but just start throwing things up there. You're able to kind of move things around. Again, push the margins out. The rule of thumb for that is to make sure that there's enough white space that it doesn't look like things are running off the page, but that it's readable for the employer. Also, font-wise, don't ever go smaller than 10-point font. Unless it's in your contact information at the top, like your address, telephone number, email, that you can go down a little bit. But 10-point is the smallest it should be in your resume. Otherwise, the reader can't read it well. So again, think about what it is that you need to communicate and make sure that you're telling a really good story about yourself there.